This week on TwoPennyGames, Meta closes one of its studios, Tango Gameworks comes back from the dead, Warner Bros. Is looking to license out some of its games, and Control 2, Max Payne 1 and 2 are sort of on the horizon. This is the TwoPenny Gamescast. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the TwoPenny Gamescast. This is your show where we give you the new news in the video game world every single week. We call it the TwoPenny Gamescast because, well, usually there are two people here to give you their sense on two different stories, respectively, of what's been going on in the gaming world recently. And unfortunately, my usual host, I play the co-host, is out on his little vacation. So for now, it is going to be just me. Unfortunately, our usual replacement co-host, Phil Shoemaker, or actually usually host, first time I'm hosting, he had some technological problems and his internet's out. And to boot, I was already having problems with audio because I'm doing the show by myself, and I suck ass at audio apparently because I can't get it to work. It's like magic to me. I don't know it. And so it's going to be a solo week this week. And it was a pretty nice week, you know? We ultimately had a little bit of a bummer story out the gate, but everything that followed kind of, smoothed things out. And so as far as news cycles go, it hasn't been all that great recently, so at least we were able to get some a little bit of a drip of good news. But you probably want to know where you can watch this. I don't know where you're doing it right now. It's probably YouTube, which you can, of course, find at TwoPennyGames. And we also are on Twitch. We usually stream this show. Unfortunately, I can't do that. I can't even get audio right. So you can find that, though, at twitch.tv/TwoPennyGames. If you hadn't noticed, I'm looking off to the side because I can't fucking remember this shit for the life of me. But, oh well. You can also find us on TikTok, though, at TwoPennyGames. Same exact thing. TWO, not just the number 2. But you also can find us on our respective Twitters, at Connor Elliott, at Con_Elliott117. Why am I even saying this? Fuck that. Find us on socials. Connor Elliott, Tavin Bothel is usually the other guy. But for where we are right now, I think we're just going to jump right into the first story. And I'm going to have a lot of water because I'm going to be doing a lot of reading and a lot of talking. I've always known that I've carried this show, but, when I'm on my own, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing a disservice by not letting them be here alongside me. My greatness should be shared with them, and being alone, that's when you can really get into the space of being way too prideful. So thankfully, I have them usually, smooth me out, but, I'll try to contain myself and start with the first story, which is no laughing matter. It is from Android Central. Exclusive. Meta is closing a beloved first-party Quest studio. This is from Nicholas Sutrich. One of VR's greatest development studios is closing its doors permanently today, August 7th. Ready at Dawn Studios was behind the famed Echo VR and Lone Echo games, all of which received critical and customer acclaim, but the studio hasn't launched a new game since Echo VR was ported to Quest in May 2020. And it's likely sales of Lone Echo 2 could have played a part in the decision, since that's a PC VR-only game. Meta first made cuts to the studio last February when it announced it would shutter Echo VR, despite still having a player count, quote, in the low 10,000s, as noted by Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth at the time. It's worth noting that Meta just stated that Quest 3 sales are, quote, exceeding their expectations in the company's most recent quarterly earnings call last week. One report in mid-July said that Meta was cutting its Reality Labs division budget by 20% by 2026, and an internal memo sent to Meta employees by Geo Hunt, VP Oculus Studios, seen by Android Central, supports this reasoning. A Meta spokesperson told Android Central that the cuts weren't being made to, quote, save money per se. Rather, these cuts are being made to ensure that Reality Labs stayed within the new budgetary constraints and that Oculus can make a, quote, better long-term impact in VR development. Meta also commented that this isn't a signal of wider cuts to the number of first-party games on Quest, and that the company is still committed to VR development. While Reality Labs has historically spent billions per quarter on the development costs of XR hardware like the Meta Quest 3 and Ray-Ban Meta Smart Glasses, VR games, and Meta AI features, the company is starting to put a hard cap on that spending quarter. spending each quarter. Ready at Dawn has been a part of Oculus Studios since June 2020, just a few weeks after VR was ported to the original Oculus Quest. Meta says that Ready at Dawn employees are encouraged to apply elsewhere within Oculus Studios, and that the company wants to retain as many talented developers as possible. Meta also explains that while this move shutters the entire studio, it isn't enough to trigger the California WARN Act. The WARN Act requires companies to give employees notice ahead of time if more than 50 employees are laid off in a 30-day period. All employees will receive severance pay similar to the previous rounds of Meta layoffs. Meta didn't provide a comment when asked about the possibility of Quest ports for Lone Echo or Lone Echo 2 by other Oculus Studios developers. That last part's probably not happening. But this is something that earlier in the year, I can't remember the developer's name. I should pull up the story, but I'm not going to waste my time trying to do that. Who had signaled that this was going to be a year of game closures, as opposed to just game layoffs, which we've been, of course, dealing with in this industry for quite some time now. And here it's happening in front of our eyes. Now, the question you always ask yourself, and we always ask on this show, is could this have been prevented? The first thing I'll do is try to steelman Meta's position here. VR is an emerging technology, and so with that is going to come a level of instability. Now, VR has a foothold, not to undermine it, but it's not one that most people partake in. Everyone on our podcast, the three people we have, me and Tavin, do not have any kind of VR system, and we're pretty hardcore gamers, Another one of our friends, the other show on the podcast, Phil Shoemaker, he does have one, but he hasn't booted it up at all in quite some time, so he's not even getting new games. It's effectively, to us, gimmicky, or at least in most of me and Phil's case, I guess, would be possibly gimmicky. That being said, though, when it comes down to it, these layoffs, they probably didn't need to happen. We see that the games industry continuously makes money, and so a lot of what they give is kind of just, business talk. Doesn't really, confront exactly why they were being cut. It's, for better long-term impact. Like, I guess just to save money. I guess that's what that's the bold-faced reading of it, I would assume. But they also mentioned that it's not signaling to wider cuts. That's a little bit unlikely, I feel. When you have such an unstable industry right now where people are just getting laid off left and right, sometimes regardless of the companies that they're working for. For example, Tango Gameworks, which we'll get into a little bit later, but they released a successful game, and it unfortunately just was still shut down, given the boot, and for what reason, we never really got a good answer, and Xbox executives kept putting their foot in their mouth. So ultimately, when you have all of these things going on, it's kind of unreasonable to say, oh yeah, I bet you're telling that. You're speaking honestly right now. There's no more layoffs. They have no clue at all. There's potentially a crash coming in the games industry. It hasn't happened, I believe, if I'm recounting from what Phil had told me before, it was 1983 was the last time there was a gaming crash. And since then, there's not really been something of the sort. And so, is this an indication of more of that to come, or are they being pretty truthful here and reasonable in saying that this is just a step within our specific company that we're we're deciding to fuck over our workers effectively. That's mainly why I say that in due part to the fact that they kind of just didn't have to trigger the California WARN Act, which, to recontextualize, says it isn't enough to trigger the California WARN Act. The WARN Act requires companies to give employees notice ahead of time if more than 50 employees are laid off in a 30-day period. And so you can tell this came out of nowhere. And you see this also, we covered a story last week. I'm blanking on what the hell it was. It was a company that, damn. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. It's almost like I should have a resource or something. But I don't. Ultimately, though, this is just run-of-the-mill dour news that we've received time and time and again this year. And this isn't going to be the last time. Is it going to get worse? Probably. It could get better. It could, kind of stay consistent, not really go anywhere. But, it's also, once again, it's VR. It's not as, it doesn't have as much, of a crowd behind it, as compared to the rest of the games on PS5, on Switch, on Xbone, or whatever they call it nowadays. So, yeah, this is just shitty. I wish I could say anything nice about it beyond that, but all I can do is go to the next penny, the second, and my second of pennies out of 4. We got an article from Automaton. This is the good news that I was referring to with Tango Gameworks. They were taken over and revived by PUBG publisher Krafton with plans to expand Hi-Fi Rush IP. So, I did not expect this to come back from the dead, but I suppose here we are, and I'm not going to complain. After abruptly... apologies, Amber V, the writer of this article, writes, after abruptly closing its doors in May this year to the shock of fans and fellow developers, Japanese game studio Tango Gameworks is set to resume its activities under Krafton. The South Korean publisher announced on August 12th that it has taken over Tango Gameworks and welcomed its employees with the cooperation of Microsoft and ZeniMax Media. Krafton also has plans for the Hi-Fi Rush IP, which it has acquired the rights to. Founded by Resident Evil director Shinji Mikami in 2010, Tango Gameworks quickly went on to be acquired by ZeniMax Media, the owner of Bethesda Softworks. From there, the studio developed the Evil Within series, Ghostwire Tokyo, and the universally acclaimed Hi-Fi Rush. In the meantime, the developer became part of Microsoft, which acquired ZeniMax Media in 2021. 2 years later, Shinji Mikami left Tango Gameworks, and in May 2024, it was suddenly announced that Tango Gameworks would be closing. Xbox executive Matt Booty called the closure a forward-thinking decision and hinted that it had to do with the studio remaining without a leader. However, fans and developers from around the world were not convinced, criticizing Microsoft harshly for unfair killing a prospective studio. But now, 2 months after Tango closure, Krafton has stepped in to take over, and it seems Microsoft has cooperation in the integration process and pledged to support the studio staff in resuming their work at the new company. Krafton already owns several development studios, including PUBG Studios, Bluehole Studio, Unknown Worlds, and Striking Distance Studios, and has produced titles such as PUBG Battlegrounds, New State Mobile, Terra, and the Callisto Protocol. In the announcement, Krafton emphasizes that this is their first major investment in the Japanese game market and an important part of their global strategy. The decision to bring Tango Gameworks on board was apparently driven by Krafton's assessment of the studio's originality and game-making skills. Who would have thought? In taking over the business, Krafton also took over the rights to the Hi-Fi Rush IP from Microsoft, which it plans to expand through future projects. However, these organizational changes are not expected to bring any changes to the existing Hi-Fi Rush, The Evil Within, or Ghostwire Tokyo, which are a part of Microsoft's catalog. So, I mean, hell yeah, right? I mean, there's no reason that anybody should be upset about this. This is some of the best news we've gotten in the gaming world. With so many goddamn closures that go on, very rarely do you see one come back from the grave from this. I can't even recall the last time one did, if they'd ever did in the first place. And this one was especially tragic, because I played it. It was one of my favorite games of that year. It was absolutely amazing. It took you back to the days of mid-2000s, Saturday night-like PlayStation 2 games, ones that were just fun action-adventure. You whacked a bunch of bad guys. Maybe it was a little bit gory. Maybe it was wacky, like Ratchet and Clank or something like that. But it really invoked that kind of feeling when playing this game again. And to hear that it had been closed down for apparently no good reason at all, given that its success was even surprising to Microsoft, for those of you that probably, you probably have heard about all of this before if you're in the know, but this is for those of you that don't. They ultimately were talking about how much they valued it and how it overperformed, and only kind praise on this studio just for a year later to close them down and never give a good answer, and always come across as kind of like, at the worst of times, blaming them, as it kind of touches on in this article of the change in leadership. The games they were putting out since he left was Hi-Fi Rush. They were able to get that out, and it was amazing. So clearly it wasn't a matter of that. It was, you were trying to cut costs. You probably made too many acquisitions, like with your Activision Blizzard one, and you wanted to save money somewhere. And you decided, because you're pretty soulless, that you're going to cut this studio's legs out from under it, despite the fact that it had performed well. And so the fact that also they're inviting the old people back is great, I hope, for them, because it must have been disappointing to be able to be a part of that company and make such good games like The Evil Within, which I hadn't played but only have heard amazing things about, and Hi-Fi Rush, and just to be canned so suddenly like that. It was disgusting, and hopefully there's enough that come back to this, because it has been a while since it closed, so chances are some people already got jobs elsewhere. I don't know if there'd be exactly a chance for them to come back. It might be too sour of an experience to do so, but I hope that they do, because they clearly made some amazing games, and it wasn't their fault that it got closed, and now that they're no longer under the thumb of Microsoft, you can see them flourish on their own merits, which they've clearly proven in times past. It's especially because it's historically made. You know, the director of Resident Evil, we played those games on our game club, where we play games every single month, and we have a couple of Resident Evil games ranked on that long list that we have. Go check it out and see how stupid we are or how smart we are. I don't take... I'm not to blame for some placements on that list. That's my addendum I put in. And the other guys probably said the exact same thing. But it's just good news. You know, what else is there to say beyond what I've already said? There was one other bit in here that actually had caught my attention, though. I was trying to remember it. I was trying to stall for time, but I'm pretty shitty at it, apparently. Yeah, that's about it. You know, hell yeah, yes. Most of the time, you have the studios, these large publishers, buying up individual studios, like, for example, the Embracer Group, who notably have closed many places, many businesses who have, you know, game companies that have done extremely good games, but were just, like this one, cut out from under them for cost-saving measures. But they bought all of these different studios, and rather than just cutting them, maybe give them their own freedom back, right? I mean, it seems like the best avenue for this kind of stuff is to have less of a monopoly over these studios, like just a greedy grab game of how many you can, you know, keep under your cloak and, you know, use as you see fit and toss out whenever you deem it to be unnecessary anymore. It's, you know, ownership by these large companies seems to, in recent years, been more of a curse than a boon. You know, and some games, like, for example, Concord, are the upcoming one, free to play. Well, that's not free to play. Team shooter, kind of reminiscent of Overwatch, which hasn't been received all that well by the public, is coming out. And if it doesn't succeed quickly enough, we have no clue if PlayStation's going to axe that studio, despite the fact that it's just their first game. And from our estimate, despite the fact it may not be getting that much attention, plays very well. You know, this level of uncertainty underneath these large publishers just should lessen. Of course, you're always going to have some of them own games, but, you know, own game studios, I should say. But what are you going to do? That's just the way our capitalist society works. I'm not really critiquing it. That's just the way it works. And so, you know, maybe we'll have some good news down the line on that kind of front. I'm just kidding. We did. Next penny, my third penny, the third penny of the show. I have to keep up the bit, the whole 2-penny thing, so I have to say it each time. I know it's redundant, but it's going to have to happen. It probably doesn't have to happen, but I'm not going to abide by the logic that says that I can't say it every single time. Because they're all my pennies. I get all the fucking change, bitch. Because Tavin's out with his girlfriend, you know. It's like, he's time for girlfriends, and he calls himself a gamer. Same thing with Phil. Also, he doesn't have an Ethernet cable connected to his PC. That's not why he couldn't be here. His internet just failed. It happened to the best of us, but fuck Tavin. I'll just say that. Anyway, third penny. This is from IGN by Rebecca Valentine. Warner Bros. Discovery wants to license franchises, which include Batman to Harry Potter and more, to other studios. Batman, Justice League, Harry Potter, Looney Tunes, Game of Thrones, the list of intellectual properties owned by Warner Bros. Discovery is massive, and an awful lot of it seems ripe for being turned into a video game. If you're thinking Warner Bros. Been a little slow to leverage that library, it sounds like the company's leadership agrees, and it's looking not just to make more of its own games, but to license out some of its biggest franchises to other games in the future. Today on Warner Bros. Discovery QT Q2 earnings, Call CEO David Zaslav and President of Global Streaming and Games J.B. Perrett responded to a question about the, quote, strategic value of games to Warner Bros. Given recent, quote, uneven performance, end quote. The company has just reported gaming revenue down 41% year over year due to underperformance of Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, compared to Hogwarts Legacy's massive success last year. Does Warner Bros. See games as a core part of its portfolio? Seems like the answer is yes. Both Zaslav and Perrett explained that they wanted to grow the gaming business, especially in the free-to-play space, which Perrett says can help balance out some of the ups and downs of the cyclical console industry. That's part of why Warner Bros. Acquired Players First Games, developer of Multiverses, earlier this year. Zaslav followed up by noting that not only did Warner Bros. Want to keep leveraging its 11 studios, but that there's, quote, also a lot of interest among others in coming to take advantage of some of that IP for gaming, which we are looking at. I can read the full quote, but I'm certainly not going to do that. I'll read it. Fuck. Perrett. We look at the evolution of the storytelling and interactive entertainment as a space and say it's one of the unique areas in media that is growing, both growing in terms of time spent, growing in terms of engagement, and growing in terms of revenue. And so we still see this as a huge opportunity for us. We know that our franchises, particularly in a world where the gaming industry launching brand new franchises is getting harder and harder for a number of reasons, including IDFA deprecation and more challenges with marketing and consumer acquisition, and that franchises like the ones we have are in high demand and can help in launching games. You still need a great game, and the reality is we've had the unfortunate, in a short period of 12 months, we've went from having the record year in 2023, and the franchise like that, redo. You still need a great game, and that reality is we've had an unfortunate, in a short period of 12 months, we went from having the record year in 2023 with Hogwarts Legacy to unfortunately having the opposite side of that spectrum with Suicide Squad. And it is still hit-driven nature of that business. But one of the areas we are particularly leaning into, which is about half of the $200 billion games business, is the free-to-play space. And the Player First deal was really about strengthening our capabilities in that space, because we do think we are subscale and we have more opportunities to grow in that space, which is a big part of the market. And when we do, then it'll help also provide some more balance to our games business, from the inevitably cyclicality of more console-based releases, which have a 3 to 4 year time horizon and a little bit more lumpiness even when you do get it right. So we continue to be strong believers in the game space. We want to continue to see and figure out how we lean into it and get bigger in that space, and we'll certainly tell you more about it as time goes on. Zaslav. One of the strategic advantages of owning all RIP is as the world changed, it used to be you launch a movie or you launch a TV series, then you do a game. But one of the reasons why Hogwarts Legacy was so successful and the number one game last year, you went to Hogwarts Legacy and you entered the game and you were able to become a part of that world. That ultimately, I think, is a big piece where this industry is going. That will create a movie, whether it's Batman or Superman or Harry Potter, and maybe there'll be a TV show, but the ability to go in that world and have that experience of spending time with all the characters is something we still own. We have 11 studios here and we have a lot of IP, and there's also a lot of interest among others in coming to take advantage of some of that IP gaming, which we are looking at. Because as JB said, we need to get bigger, and the IP that we own and the value that it has in the gaming space is something we are looking forward to taking advantage of. Warner Bros. Discovery reported a revenue of $9.7 billion for the quarter, but an overall net loss of $10 billion, $9.1 billion of which was due to impairment charges. The company also reported subscription services were up to 3.6 million subscribers from last quarter, bringing its total to 103.3 million. So quite a mouthful. In fact, my throat is goddamn parched. But I will carry on while I refill my cup. Piggybacking a little bit off the story that was just covered about Tango Gameworks coming back from the brink, and it no longer being under the thumb of Microsoft, this can allow these IPs to breathe a little bit. Not only in the form of getting them released, because, Game of Thrones, the fact that it was one of those things that wasn't taken advantage of when it easily could have been while the show was airing is kind of a mystery in a way, but it's not too late for it now, and they've been sitting on it and haven't really been doing anything. Justice League obviously failed. Batman we haven't had in quite some time. Harry Potter, of course, everyone knows that came out. Looney Tunes, which, I guess you can do a Looney Tunes game, but obviously there's some ones that peak out a little bit more. And now maybe other studios will have a better chance at getting it right. And that sounds super great, and I am looking forward to the future with some hope. But ultimately, Warner Bros. Still owns these IPs, and so they could still really have their fingers in everyone's pudding. We know with Justice League that it took a game company, Rocksteady, that is usually so good at making these nice, good-feeling superhero games, defining what they are with Batman, the Arkham series, and just not doing anything at all. They just instead went instead of doing the route that they had already been working for them, they decided to go on the whole, everyone likes playing games that are live service games. It's the big new word that was all the rage amongst these studios and publishers. And so that's what Justice League, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League became, when it was focusing on all these dumb, collectibles and getting different skins and weapons for your characters, and just doing basic, boring missions of, capping. I can't remember what the fuck they were when I was, intimating myself with the reviews, but suffice it to say, it was just, slop. It was slop. That's what it was. It was just slop that was churned out by a company, basically a video game developer with the publisher's gun to the back of their head. They shouldn't have been making a live service game. It's a specific type of game that you kind of have to be acclimated to a certain degree. And just throwing, people of Batman Arkham fame into that landscape is pretty unreasonable to expect them to have some sort of, amazing gut punch of a game that takes everyone's socks away. But ultimately, they're clearly going to do more with Hogwarts. That was a given. Whether that'll be underneath their umbrella or doing, as they say, licensing them out to other game developers is unclear. They'll probably keep it under themselves since they already did it successfully once. But certainly with things like Game of Thrones, they can go out there with it. Going back to Harry Potter, well, maybe if they do a sequel to Hogwarts Legacy, maybe they'll do a different in-universe Harry Potter game. I'm not too familiar with a lot of the lore that goes on in there, and so they could go super crazy with it. I'm assuming it's well written. I know the author likes to have mold growing in her house, but she apparently wrote something that was pretty good, considering how many fans there are. And there's probably a rich world to tap into. Same with Game of Thrones, of course. You're seeing it with things like House of the Dragon right now. There's another show, something from The Tall, coming out. I don't keep up with it that much, but there's mileage that these shows get. They get people's eyes on them. House of the Dragon, it wasn't expected to be, anything impressive, but it came out, and despite the fact that the last season of Game of Thrones petered out hard, ultimately people flocked to it, and overall have some pretty great things to say. Not as good as Game of Thrones did back in its heyday, but people seem to enjoy the show. And there's some excitement for the new one that's coming out. So these things have an audience to, that wants to partake in it. And the fact that you've been sitting on these things is really stupid. There was a popular web series that came out recently called Smiling Friends. In the second season, there was this retro game character who was all washed up, and he was trying to get his game made again, be back in that setting and whatnot. And his big roadblock was the company that owned his IP was just sitting on it. And that was of course, not very subtle commentary, but it really is these people. They just don't do anything with it. And so at least they're taking some kind of initiative in trying to get their games out. And it's not necessarily going to be, because they're, all involved in it and screwing things up. But it's Warner Bros. It's going to be a big company, and they're, of course, going to be involved in some way. They want to know how their product's doing, but ultimately, they just need to stay the fuck away from any decision of what the game should be able to do. And the idea of being a licensed game kind of insinuates that. But once again, who really knows? These people are the ones who have been laying off tons and tons of workers, and so it's kind of hard to really trust them at all, especially when they're taking large earnings and, their employees are getting laid off. I'm not really familiar right off the bat with Warner Bros. Layoffs, but I'm sure they've happened, and I'm sure we've covered it on the show before, but I'm not going to try and bother and make sense of that from here. Anything else really to play? Yeah, entering the free play space, I guess that'll work, Something tells me that when it comes to free-to-play games, they just aren't sustainable for the developer in the long run. I mean, you had developers of Fortnite, Epic Games, they had some layoffs not that long ago, with Fortnite, one of the biggest games in the world, constantly having updates. They didn't seem to be spared from that. So if a Titan like them is getting along a little bit difficult, and I believe the Apex Legends creators, I'm fucking blanking on their goddamn name, and I love them too. I am not going to be able to live this down if I do not look it up. The developer is like on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't fucking Respawn. I'm an idiot. Respawn, they kind of had laid off people as well. And so free to play, kind of like when they were going into the whole live service games. I don't think it's, I don't necessarily think it's sustainable. And to say that they're especially in the free to play space they're interested in, that kind of worries me. It's fine to dip your toes into it, but it might not be the best thing to consistently have, especially since that can kind of be traced back to a lot of, it's harder for games to make money as opposed to just getting a game out there and then moving on to the next thing. And free-to-play games generally have some kind of incentive to continue onwards because that's how they make their money on the back end of things. And so, that's a little bit of a downer on this story in an otherwise pretty positive one, or maybe just hopeful in my case. But I have some hope that now Warner Bros. Is going to do the right thing and not suck as much anymore. But we will see on that. And what we'll also see in a long, long, long while is any kind of news on Control 2. This is from IGN. Ryan Dinsdale. I'm going to need to drink for this one again. It's not vodka. I swear. Got a nice little bit of ice in there. But, yeah, we have that article from IGN, and that's Ryan Dinsdale. Control 2 in production readiness stage at Remedy. Max Payne remakes in full production. Control 2 is now in the production readiness stage at Alan Wake developer Remedy Entertainment, while the Controller multiplayer spin-off and Max Payne 1 and 2 remake have entered full production. Remedy revealed the progress in its latest financial earnings report, confirming Control 2 has passed the proof-of-concept stage and has progressed to the production readiness stage. No further timeline was shared, but Max Payne 1 and 2 has now entered full production 10 months after it reached the same, quote, production readiness stage, end quote. This would indicate Control 2 will enter full production around June 2025. Max Payne 1 and 2 reaching the stage means Remedy is now actively working on it, though no release window was shared. The game was unsurprisingly a bundle featuring remakes of the first two action games from 2001 and 2003. Condor, now the only multiplayer game in development at Remedy after it canceled another mysterious project codenamed Kestrel in May 2024, has also entered full production. The development team has worked on multiple maps and different mission types, and we have organized a growing amount of internal and limited external playtesting for feature validation and feedback, Remedy said. These games, having only just entered full production, and Control not even being there yet, are likely still years away. The development timeline may be sped up somewhat by the cancellation of Kestrel. However, as Remedy said at the time, it would reallocate developers from this project to 3 other games. So, we've known Control 2 is coming for a while now. We have a general idea of when it's coming out. Do we really need to know that? Not at all. But it came out in the earnings report, so now we do. It's out there. And, that seems about reasonable. Since it's entering in about 2025, June, I'm not even going to bother trying to guess the month. Let's say it'll be, 2027, if you're being super, super hopeful. 2026, but it's not going to be 2026. So 2027 at the earliest. 2028, Jesus, that'd be kind of 2028 would be 4 years from now, which I guess isn't the longest time, but it probably is reasonable as to where we'll be with Control 2. So that's nice. The more important thing is the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes. It's now in full development, and now since it's 2024, we'll see that maybe in 2026, when they start maybe, giving a little bit of a teaser for Control. They'll already have thrown their punches that year with releasing it, maybe they kind of do their stuff, from my knowledge, kind of later in the year. So I'll actually guess a month, maybe 2026. No, but that might not be. Yeah, no, they did February. Okay, well, either way, chances are we're not going to see that until at least 2026, 2027 potentially. It's closer, but it's not necessarily that close either. It's once again just something that we're really hearing about only because of the earnings report. It's the last time we talked about Remedy, they had canceled that Kestrel game, which overall was, we kind of had a good take on that because a lot of these live service games that it had planned on being were just not really going to cut out. It's not what people want nowadays, or at least it's not sustainable. Even if you are able to find an audience, it's kind of hard to keep that stuff alive. And it's just for the best that we're just keeping Remedy to doing what they do best, which is creating those super nice first person single player action games. Max Payne 3 was done by Rockstar, which is the only one I did. I would like to go back and play the first two. I had a friend who touched them, and he had only good things to say about it. And looking at it, it looked super fucking fun. It looked grungy. It looked like it wasn't all that graphically advanced, but you didn't really give a shit because you're diving around corners, blaring fucking guns at people. You do that in Max Payne 3 as well, but there's something grimier about it in those first two games from the footage that I've seen. And so I kind of want to get in there and play those old games before these remakes come out, which we have our game club where we rank games every single month. I don't know if Max Payne's on there. If it isn't, then I will go ahead and put that on there for next week. I also was going to put on... what the fuck was I going to put on? I'm trying to remember what it was, because it was like a perfect fucking game that Phil and Tavin will undoubtedly love and love to play it, because it's an amazing game. It's a super fantastic game, but I can't remember it. So ultimately... thank you. Thanks for letting us know. I mean, not that we needed it, but oh well. Well, I guess that's it. That was the solo Connor episode of the Two Penny Games cast. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it myself. It wouldn't be something I would be opposed to again, especially to get a little bit more practice in, because maybe I'm not able to spout off the run-of-the-mill, house cleaning that usually Tavin takes over with, but it's my turn now, and I guess in that time, come and check out some of the other videos on our channel. I mean, we, like I said before, I think my favorite thing to do on this show, I should say, is the Game Club, where we play a game every single month. We are down to, since it's not going to be the longest episode, might as well go list off the games that we have currently on that ranking. We have long discussions about most of the time we have long discussions about each game that we end up playing on that club, and it's always a super big amount of fun. Even when it's a game we don't really like, it's nice to come around, talk about it, and then get a little bit anticipated for the wheel to pick, which once every month we'll do that, or one of us will pick a little game to play, something that we want to, make the other two suffer through. But right now, the ranking is going from 26, Fable Anniversary, 25, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, number 24, Prey, number 23, Tomb Raider, the remake, 22, Batman Arkham Asylum, 21, Uncharted Drake's Fortune, 20, Halo Combat Evolved, 19, Dead Cells, 18, Shadow of the Colossus, 17, Mario 64, 16, Resident Evil 4, 15, Portal, 14, Pokemon Soul Silver, 13, Severed, Resident Evil 12, 11, Chrono Trigger, 10, Dishonored, 8, 9, Metal Gear Solid, 8, Shovel Knight, 7, Portal 2, 6, Doom 2016, 5, Yakuza 0, 4, Hades, 3, Final Fantasy 7, that's the original, 2, The Last of Us, and 1, God of War Ragnarok. I could have done that better. But go watch out our reviews there, or complain at our rankings on the shorts that we have up over at YouTube at TwoPennyGames.com. You can also check us out once again on Twitter at TwoPennyGames, at TwoPennyGames. You do the little @ thing. You can also find us, of course, at TikTok, where we upload shorts to there as well. 1 minute to 2 minute shorts, whatever we decide to do, at TwoPennyGames. And we would really appreciate any likes, comments down below. We like to take everyone's comments into consideration unless we disagree with them. And so come on down and talk with us. I got to get in there more. That's my declaration. This is the Connor guarantee. I will be more active in the comment section. So please come and talk to people. Come and talk to me, please. 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 Have a nice day, guys.